Imagine a world just recovering from the ravages of the war to end all wars, only to be thrust into an even greater conflict. This is the story of WWII. As the smoke cleared from the battlefields of World War I, the world drew a collective breath and hoped for lasting peace. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in June of 1919, was designed to prevent future conflicts. However, it instead sowed the seeds of resentment and unrest, particularly in Germany. The treaty's harsh terms, including the loss of territory, severe restrictions on its military, and the demand for reparations, were seen by many Germans as a national humiliation. This widespread discontent provided fertile ground for extremist ideologies to take root. As the world grappled with the consequences of the Great War, the pendulum of history was already swinging towards another devastating conflict. The stage was set for a conflict that would dwarf the horrors of the Great War. From the ashes of the Great War, new powers rose, fueled by economic hardship and aggressive nationalism. As the world tried to recover from the devastation of World War I, the global economy was in turmoil. The Roaring Twenties was a time of great economic growth, but it was followed by the Great Depression, a period of severe worldwide economic downturn that lasted throughout the 30s. This hardship was felt by every nation, but it was particularly severe in those countries that had been most affected by the war. In this bleak atmosphere, a new breed of leadership emerged, promising a return to prosperity and national pride. In Germany, Adolf Hitler rose to power, capitalizing on the resentment felt by many Germans towards the Treaty of Versailles. The treaty, which ended World War I, had imposed heavy penalties on Germany, and Hitler's promises to defy it and restore Germany's former glory resonated with a population desperate for change. In Italy, Benito Mussolini also used the economic crisis and nationalistic sentiment to his advantage. He introduced a totalitarian regime, promising stability and strength in a time of chaos. His charismatic leadership and strong-arm tactics won him the support of many Italians, who were disillusioned with their government's inability to deal with the economic crisis. Meanwhile, in the East, Japan was undergoing a militaristic transformation. The country was rapidly industrializing and its military was growing in strength. The government fostered a sense of nationalistic pride and a desire for expansion, which led to a series of aggressive moves in the region. These leaders exploited the economic hardship and nationalistic grievances of their people to gain power. They promised to restore their nations to their former glory, and their aggressive rhetoric and actions stirred up tensions around the world. The world watched as these new powers flexed their might, setting a course for conflict. These leaders, driven by ambition and a desire for power, would soon plunge the world into another devastating war, the effects of which are still felt today. In Germany, a charismatic leader promised to restore the nation's former glory. His name was Adolf Hitler, and his rise to power was as swift as it was alarming. In the wake of World War I, Germany was a nation in turmoil. The Treaty of Versailles had imposed harsh terms, leaving the German people feeling humiliated and disenfranchised. Seizing on this nationalistic sentiment, Hitler, with his Nazi party, began to gain traction. His charismatic speeches and promises to revoke the Treaty of Versailles resonated with the German people, who were desperate for a return to prosperity and dignity. Hitler's rise was not just about charisma and promises, though. He had a vision, one that saw Germany rise from the ashes of defeat to reclaim its place as a world power. This vision included the rearmament of Germany, a direct defiance of the Treaty of Versailles. The world watched in alarm as Germany began to build up its military might. Yet many chose to turn a blind eye, hoping that the threat would somehow dissipate. But Hitler was not to be ignored. In 1936 he made his boldest move yet, remilitarizing the Rhineland, a region demilitarized by the Treaty of Versailles. This move was a clear signal that Hitler had no intention of playing by the rules. His defiance was met with applause at home. The German people, tired of being perceived as the losers of World War I, rallied behind their leader. Hitler's popularity soared, and with it, the power and influence of the Nazi Party. But the world stage was about to witness more than just a resurgence of German pride. The stage was being set for a conflict of a scale never seen before. Germany was back on the world stage, stronger, more defiant and more dangerous than ever. The world had changed, old empires were gone and new ones were hungry for power and territory. As the 1930s progressed, the world saw a series of aggressive expansionist policies by nations that would soon be key players in the Second World War. Italy, under the dictatorship of Benito Mussolini, sought to establish a new Roman Empire. This ambitious vision led to the invasion of Ethiopia in 1935, an act that shocked the international community and exposed the League of Nations' inability to enforce peace. Across the globe, Japan, gripped by militarism and nationalism, eyed the resources of its neighbor, China. In 1937, following the Marco Polo Bridge incident, Japan launched a full-scale invasion of China. This conflict, later known as the Second Sino-Japanese War, marked the beginning of Japan's aggressive expansion in East Asia, which would ultimately lead to its involvement in the global conflict. Meanwhile, in Europe, Germany, under the leadership of Adolf Hitler, was in the throes of a tumultuous transformation. Hitler, driven by a vision of a greater Germany and a deep-seated resentment of the Treaty of Versailles, set his sights on Austria. In 1938, Germany orchestrated the Anschluss, a political union that effectively annexed Austria into the German Reich. This was a blatant violation of the Versailles Treaty, yet the international community did little to stop Hitler's ambitions. In the same year, the Sudetenland crisis unfolded. The Sudetenland, a region of Czechoslovakia heavily populated by ethnic Germans, became a focal point of Hitler's expansionist policies. Claiming the German-speaking population was being oppressed, Hitler demanded the region be ceded to Germany. This crisis would culminate in the Munich Agreement, a pact that allowed Germany to annex the Sudetenland in the name of peace. But as history would reveal, this peace was short-lived. These early aggressions were not isolated incidents. Rather, they were the manifestation of a world order in flux, a world where old powers were weakened and new powers were eager to fill the vacuum. Each aggression, each annexation, each invasion was a step closer to a global conflict. The world was a stage and the actors were preparing for a performance that would redefine the course of human history. These early aggressions set the stage for the horrors to come. The world watched, some with anticipation, others with dread, as the storm clouds of war gathered. The policies of expansion and aggression driven by nationalism, militarism, and a hunger for power were leading the world down a path from which there would be no return. The world was on a knife's edge, teetering on the brink of another global conflict. In a desperate bid for peace, Britain and France made a deal with the devil. This deal, known as the Munich Agreement, was a classic example of appeasement, a policy of making concessions to an aggressor in hopes of avoiding war. In September of 1938, hoping to avert another catastrophic conflict, these nations allowed Adolf Hitler to annex the Sudetenland, a region of Czechoslovakia inhabited largely by ethnic Germans. The Munich Agreement was hailed as a triumph of diplomacy, a guarantee of peace for our time, as British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain put it, but instead of quelling Hitler's territorial appetite, it only emboldened him. The promise of peace was but an illusion. By acquiescing to Hitler's demands, Britain and France had inadvertently given him the green light to pursue his aggressive expansionist policies, ultimately leading to the invasion of Poland. Appeasement had failed. The world was now on a collision course with war. In a shocking move, Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union joined forces, sealing the fate of Eastern Europe. This unlikely alliance was codified in the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, a non-aggression treaty signed in the summer of 1939. Named after the foreign ministers of the two countries, Vyacheslav Molotov of the Soviet Union and Joachim von Ribbentrop of Germany, the agreement was a diplomatic bombshell, but beneath the surface, a secret protocol was brewing. This hushed clause outlined a plan for the division of Eastern Europe into German and Soviet spheres of influence. Poland, a nation reborn after World War I, was to be dissected, its western territories going to Germany and its eastern regions to the Soviets. This pact was more than a handshake between two powers. It was a death warrant for Poland's sovereignty. It allowed Hitler to pursue his expansionist policies without fear of Soviet intervention. And for Stalin, it bought time to prepare the Soviet Union for a war he saw as inevitable. The two giants had set the stage for a colossal chess game, with Poland as the sacrificial pawn, and so, it began. On September 1, 1939, without a formal declaration of war, Germany invaded Poland. The assault was swift and brutal, showcasing the terrifying power of the German military machine. The Polish forces, despite their courageous resistance, were no match for the Blitzkrieg, a German war strategy marked by fast, concentrated attacks intended to create disorganization among enemy forces. The invasion of Poland was more than a military operation. It was the spark that ignited the powder keg of World War II. Britain and France, bound by treaties to protect Poland, declared war on Germany 2 days later. The world watched in disbelief as the storm clouds of war gathered once again just 2 decades after the end of the war to end all wars. On September 1, 1939, WWII began. The world would never be the same. The world had once again been plunged into a global conflict, born from economic hardship, political instability, and failed diplomacy. The labyrinth of events leading up to the Second World War was not a simple chain, but a complex web of actions and reactions, decisions made and consequences borne. At the heart of the conflict lay a world reeling from the aftermath of the First World War, with the Treaty of Versailles leaving deep scars that would only fester over time. Economic turmoil swept across the globe, with the Great Depression leaving millions destitute and desperate. It was during this time of uncertainty and desperation that totalitarian regimes began to rise, with leaders such as Hitler, Mussolini, and militarized Japan exploiting the economic and nationalistic grievances of their people. In Germany, Hitler's charismatic leadership and promises to restore Germany's former glory won him the support of the German people. His defiance of the Treaty of Versailles with the rearmament of Germany and the remilitarization of the Rhineland marked the beginning of a dangerous game of power and control. Meanwhile, expansionist policies and early aggressions were reshaping the geopolitical landscape. Italy invaded Ethiopia, Japan invaded China, and Germany annexed Austria and the Sudetenland. These actions were often met with appeasement, as seen in the Munich Agreement, which only served to embolden Hitler and his aggressive ambitions. The final straw came with the shocking Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, followed by Germany's invasion of Poland. This was the immediate trigger for World War II, with Britain and France declaring war on Germany. Looking back, we can see how the combination of economic hardship, political instability, aggressive nationalism, and failed diplomatic policies all contributed to the outbreak of World War II. But understanding these events is not simply about remembering what happened, it's about learning from the past and striving to prevent similar conflicts in the future. History is a stern teacher. Understanding the origins of WWII is not just about remembering the past, but about learning from it. It's a lesson we cannot afford to forget.